Okay, picture this. You're scrolling through a site that looks a lot like eBay or Amazon, but instead of old books or new electronics, you're looking at listings for someone's actual passport. You're seeing platinum credit cards, fake driver's licenses, and social security cards all up for sale. Long before the dark web was a common term, there was a place called ShadowCrew. And, this wasn't just some messy chat room. It was a super organized marketplace with 4,000 members, all focused on one thing: turning identity theft into an industry. Let's dig into the blueprint they created, a blueprint that's still used today.
You see, they didn't just steal data. They built a corporate structure for crime that was scary effective. By the time the feds finally shut them down, ShadowCrew had trafficked at least 1.7 million stolen credit cards. The damage? Over $4 million in documented losses, and that's just what they could prove. So today, we're going to look at how they built the very foundation of modern cybercrime.
So here's our plan for this explainer. We're going to break down the rise and fall of this first real cybercriminal empire. We'll kick things off with their corporate-style hierarchy, then we'll dive into their carding curriculum, which basically made large-scale fraud accessible to thousands. After that, we'll get into the takedown and how a double agent brought the whole thing down from the inside, and most importantly, we'll connect the dots from this criminal mastermind to the very real threats that you face online today and what you can actually do about it.
Back in the 90s, hacking was mostly about ego, right? It was all about bragging rights, teenagers breaking into systems just to say they could. But in 2002, the game totally changed. ShadowCrew launched, and it wasn't a joke. It was a one-stop online marketplace for criminals. And to really get why it was so dangerous, you have to look at who was running it. This wasn't some loose group of hackers. It was basically a dictatorship with a global team.
When the Department of Justice finally unsealed their indictment, what they found was a structure that looked less like a hacker forum and more like a C-suite. At the very top, you had Andrew Mantovani in Arizona. He was the co-founder, the CEO, calling all the shots. Then there was David Appleyard in New Jersey, kind of the COO, handling the day-to-day. But the real linchpin, the key to the whole operation, was their partner, Anatoly Tuchanov, the CTO, based in Moscow. This US-Russian alliance was critical. It bridged the gap between American consumer data and that top-tier Eastern European hacking talent.
And right below that executive team, you had a layer of moderators. But don't let the name fool you. These weren't just guys cleaning up the forums. They were middle managers. You had people like Jeremy Stevens in North Carolina and Marcelo Del Mazo all the way down in Buenos Aires. Their job was to enforce what you could basically call criminal quality control. They brought order to the chaos of the underground, making sure that all 4,000 members played by the rules.
So you might be asking, why did they need this whole corporate setup? Well, ShadowCrew wasn't just helping people commit crimes. They were practically building a school for it. They created this whole system of trust and education that allowed fraud to scale up to an industrial level.
The main thing here was something called carding. And, that's not just stealing a credit card number, that's just picking a lock. ShadowCrew taught you how to own the house. They showed you how to use that stolen data, how to use fake documents to systematically rip off banks and retailers. They were there for the entire criminal process.
And this is probably the most terrifying part of their whole business model: quality assurance. Think about it. In the criminal world, if you get ripped off, who do you complain to? Nobody. Well, ShadowCrew solved that. To sell anything on their site, you had to be an approved vendor. And that meant you had to give samples of your stolen goods to the admins. They would literally test the illegal products to make sure they worked. If your stolen credit cards were duds, you were banned. Simple as that.
And because of this system of trust, the sheer volume of what they were moving was just staggering. We're talking at least 1.7 million credit card numbers. But it wasn't just cards. It was fake passports, driver's licenses, social security cards, entire digital lives, all for sale on a marketplace that had, believe it or not, a 5-star review system.
And get this, they didn't just sell the fish. They taught everyone else how to fish too. The site had these educational forums teaching everything from cryptography and social engineering to how to write your own phishing emails. They were democratizing the tools of fraud. The Secret Service director at the time, a guy named W. Ralph Basham, he hit the nail on the head. He said information is the world's new currency. And if that's true, then ShadowCrew was the mint.
But running a global criminal enterprise this big, it requires infrastructure. And infrastructure is usually where you get sloppy, where you get caught. The U.S. Secret Service launched this year-long undercover sting they called Operation Firewall. But they didn't just watch from the sidelines. They got inside. And they did it with the help of a double agent.
Enter a man named Albert Gonzalez,
On the site, he was known as Kumba Johnny. And he wasn't just some random member. He was a moderator. He had inside access to the whole operation. But after he got busted, he was flipped. He became a confidential informant for the Secret Service.
So for a whole year, the Secret Service had Gonzalez operate a VPN, a virtual private network for the ShadowCrew members. They all used it, thinking it was keeping their communications secret and anonymous. But in reality, they were routing their entire criminal enterprise directly through a Secret Service listening post. It was a brilliant, brilliant trap.
And that trap finally snapped shut on October 28, 2004. In this massive, coordinated international strike, law enforcement arrested over 21 people. The indictment was huge, 62 counts, covering everything from conspiracy to trafficking. The one-stop online marketplace was officially out of business.
But here is where the story takes a major twist. It doesn't end with the bust. Albert Gonzalez, the informant who helped bring down ShadowCrew, he didn't just go and retire. No, he learned. He took everything he saw from his unique spot inside both the criminal world and law enforcement, and he decided he was going to build something way bigger. See, Gonzalez realized that selling individual cards one by one on a forum, that's small time. It's inefficient. Why pickpocket, he thought, when you could just rob the bank? So after ShadowCrew, he went on to mastermind the massive data breaches of the retail giant TJX and the payment processor Heartland Payment Systems. He took all the lessons from ShadowCrew, organization, industrial scale, and he applied them to wholesale theft.
The scale is it's hard to even wrap your head around. In the Heartland breach alone, his team stole over 130 million card accounts using a simple technique. Gonzalez had basically graduated from being a player in the market to owning the entire supply chain himself.
Now, ShadowCrew itself might be long gone, but their business model is absolutely everywhere. This whole access-as-a-service idea they pioneered, selling the keys to the kingdom, that's now the standard operating procedure for modern cybercrime. So how in the world do you protect yourself? Okay, 3 things. First, stalk the password death cycle. The data sold on ShadowCrew is still floating around out there, being used in automated attacks. Reusing a password is like handing criminals a master key to your life. Second, just assume you've been breached. Gonzalez sat inside corporate networks for months undetected. You need to watch your own accounts with that same level of paranoia. And third, and this one is huge, enable multi-factor authentication. It is the single best defense against the exact kind of credential theft that ShadowCrew turned into a global industry. So if there's one thing to take away, it's this. The ShadowCrew bust didn't actually end cybercrime. It just forced it to get smarter, to evolve. It pushed the really ambitious hackers, guys like Gonzalez, to stop selling individual identities and start targeting the entire corporate infrastructure that holds all of our data.
And that leaves us with a really critical question for our world today. What happens when a hacker goes from just picking pockets to robbing the bank vault itself? The ShadowCrew story, as you can see, was really just the beginning. And the story of what Albert Gonzalez did next with Heartland Payment Systems, well, that shows us exactly what comes next.